Do you remember those forgotten dinners no one makes anymore? They once filled homes with warmth, laughter, and the smell of something real. When did we stop making time for meals like that? Beans and cornbread was the gospel of the broke South. Pinto beans soaked overnight, slow-cooked all day, and served steaming hot with a thick slice of cornbread. This was not just dinner. This was survival seasoned with tradition. The beans were soft and earthy, flavored with salt, onions, or maybe a ham hock if someone blessed you. The cornbread was crumbly and golden, sometimes sweet, sometimes not, depending on what part of the country raised you. It was not just a recipe, it was a ritual passed down from someone who learned to stretch a dime into dignity. Even if it was humble, it still brought people to the table like it was a Sunday feast. You broke off chunks and dipped them into the beans like it was communion. And in some ways, it was. Families gathered around it. Conversations started over it. Empty stomachs were quieted by it. It was a meal you could eat for days without getting tired of it because it tasted like home, like history, like someone cared enough to soak the beans instead of rushing a can. And even if they had to rush it, canned beans and boxed cornbread mix, it still counted. It always did. Buffalo tongue stew was once considered a delicacy of the plains, offering rich texture and surprising tenderness that rewarded those willing to use every part of the animal. After a successful hunt, hunters cleaned the tongue carefully and simmered it for hours with onions, carrots, and a handful of wild herbs until the meat turned soft and silky. The broth thickened naturally, creating a savory base that clung to chunks of potato or cornbread dunked at the table. Around campfires or in frontier cabins, the stew became both celebration and sustenance, honoring the animal that provided so much. Children listened wide-eyed to stories of the chase while the fragrant steam carried through the crisp night air. This dish reflected a deep respect for nature's gifts and the understanding that waste was not an option. Today, buffalo herds have returned, but few cooks attempt the careful preparation of tongue, leaving this once-cherished meal largely forgotten except in the memories of those who knew its unique richness. Chess pie with vinegar was one of the South's thriftiest desserts, proving that even the poorest households could enjoy something sweet. Made from sugar, eggs, butter, and a splash of vinegar, it baked into a custard-like pie with a tangy edge. The vinegar cut the sweetness, balancing the richness of the filling and making it unique. Families loved chess pie because the ingredients were always on hand, no matter how tight the budget. It was served at Sunday dinners, holidays, and gatherings, offering comfort and familiarity. While fancier pies required fruit or nuts, chess pie was humble and practical, making it beloved across generations. Children often remembered it as the dessert of their childhood, while adults prized it for its simplicity. Today, it is less common outside of heritage cookbooks, replaced by more modern sweets. Chess pie with vinegar stands as a symbol of Depression-era resilience, turning pantry basics into something remarkable. Forgotten now, it remains a dish worth remembering for both its flavor and history. Poke salad greens were one of those dishes that demanded both courage and care. Pokeweed grew wild and fast, but it could turn dangerous if you did not boil it just right. Still, folks learned how to tame it. After boiling and rinsing it several times, they would fry it in bacon grease until tender and smoky. It became a side dish with real backbone, a plate full of green proof that mountain people could make a meal out of almost anything. Every bite carried a hint of the wild earth it came from. Eating poke salad was an act of both survival and defiance. A way to say, we will eat well, even when the cupboard's empty. Served with cornbread or salt pork, it fed families through hard months when gardens were thin. In every community that made it, poke salad greens stood for resilience, bravery, and the genius of hungry folks who refused to go without. When tomato sauce wasn't in the pantry and butter wasn't an option, a surprising combination stepped in: mayonnaise and mustard. Tossed with hot spaghetti noodles and seasoned with a dash of salt and pepper, this unusual pairing became a quick-fix meal known as mayo and mustard spaghetti, which was both budget-friendly and undeniably memorable. Spaghetti itself was one of the most affordable dry goods available, filling enough to feed a family without requiring much else. Mayonnaise, often stocked in refrigerators for sandwiches and salads, brought richness and a creamy texture, while mustard added just enough tang to keep things interesting. It wasn't gourmet, but it turned plain pasta into something that felt like a complete dish without the need for meat, cheese, or expensive sauces. In working-class households, meals like this weren't about following a recipe. They were about making do with what was available. Kids grew up eating it straight from the pot, a quick meal before heading outside to play or finishing homework at the kitchen table. It may not have been a dinner guests would rave about, but for those who remember it, the taste still lingers as a reminder of simpler times and just how far a few basic ingredients could go. Chicken fried steak. This classic is long gone but never forgotten. This one's pretty easy to make too. All you need is a chicken steak dredged in a seasoned flour mixture, dipped in a wet batter, and finally coated in a crispy breading. Fry till it's golden brown for the perfect dinner that'll leave you wanting more. Chicken fried steak is typically served with a creamy gravy for dipping, along with mashed potatoes and vegetables for a complete and oh-so-satisfying meal. It is basically American, and the yassified version of the Austrian dish Wiener Schnitzel, and the Italian dish cotoletta alla Milanese. Fancy names, but the same old fried chicken steak. Now I know what you're thinking. Why did this crispy golden goodness leave us too soon? Well, you can trick yourself all you want, but it's not the healthiest dinner out there. But hey, having a fried steak once in a while can't do much harm, right? Just be prepared for some finger-licking good action. This dish is messy, but in the best way possible. Chili and crackers were the meal you made when you needed fire in your belly and not much else. Ground beef, a can of beans, tomato sauce, and every spice you could find in the back of the cabinet. You let it simmer until it thickened, bubbling and bold. The kind of dish that fogged up the windows and warmed up the room. You served it with saltine crackers, always saltines, stacked on the side or crumbled right in. Sometimes there was shredded cheese, sometimes a dollop of sour cream. But usually, it was just the basics. And that was fine, because chili did not need help. It had enough heat, enough bite, enough heart. You ate it with a spoon too big for the bowl and left the table feeling like you had won something. Maybe you had. Wild turkey. Pot pie turned a successful hunt into a dish of deep comfort on bitter mountain nights. Hunters cleaned the bird carefully, saving every piece of meat and simmering it with carrots, onions, and herbs until the broth grew rich and fragrant. A heavy cast-iron crust of flour, lard, and spring water was rolled thick and laid over the bubbling filling before the pot was set near glowing coals. Slow baking gave the crust a golden sheen while trapping steam inside so the turkey stayed tender and moist. Families gathered around the fire as the scent of roasting meat and pastry drifted through the cold air. Each slice brought warmth and gratitude, a celebration of skill and luck in a land where every meal mattered. Children learned the recipe by watching, knowing that success in the wilderness meant honoring the harvest completely. Modern kitchens rarely attempt such patient cooking, but the memory of wild turkey pot pie remains a testament to frontier hospitality and the enduring pleasure of a meal earned by hand. Pineapple. Upside-down cake in cast iron was once the ultimate Southern hostess dessert, a showpiece that combined practicality with flair. It was made by layering canned pineapple rings, cherries, and brown sugar in the bottom of a cast iron skillet, then pouring cake batter on top. After baking, the cake was flipped out to reveal a golden caramelized topping that dazzled guests. This dish thrived in the mid-20th century, when canned fruit became widely available and affordable. It quickly became a centerpiece at church suppers, potlucks, and holiday gatherings. Children were enchanted by its bright colors, while adults admired its sweet, buttery flavor. The cast-iron skillet made it accessible since nearly every household had one, and it ensured even cooking and a crisp edge. Though it once symbolized Southern hospitality and creativity, it has mostly disappeared from modern tables, overshadowed by convenience desserts. Today, it survives only in nostalgic memory, reminding us of a time when a single cake could capture the joy of a community. Bay laurel leaf pudding infused a humble custard with the subtle perfume of evergreen leaves, bringing a hint of old-world sophistication to rural Southern kitchens. Grandmothers steeped fresh bay leaves in warm milk, allowing their gentle aroma to blend with sugar, eggs, and a touch of cream. The mixture was slowly steamed until it set into a silky dessert that carried a faint herbal sweetness and a whisper of the forest. Served cool or slightly warm, the pudding offered a flavor both comforting and unexpected, perfect for quiet evenings or special guests. Children often helped gather the glossy leaves, learning which branches held the best scent. The dessert's soft texture and delicate fragrance made it stand out among heavier sweets of the era. Bay laurel leaf pudding illustrates how Southern grandmothers blended European culinary heritage with local ingredients, creating a dish that was elegant yet firmly rooted in the natural abundance of their own backyard gardens and wooded hillsides. Cabbage and sausage skillet dinners were the kind that kept a family full without emptying the pantry. Smoked sausage, sliced thin, went into a hot skillet first, its fat sizzling and coating the pan. Then came chopped cabbage and diced potatoes, fried together until soft and browned at the edges. The flavors mingled, smoky and sweet, simple and satisfying. It was the perfect end to a long workday, cooked in one pan and shared straight from it. You could smell it from the porch, and it always brought folks running. The sausage might be cheap, the cabbage humble, but together they made a dinner that felt whole. Hill families loved it for being fast, filling, and made from whatever was left in the kitchen. It was comfort food that never needed explaining, a reminder that good flavor comes from care, not cost. When the skillet was empty, there was always a little left in the heart. Eggs and milk, two of the most basic ingredients in any 1960s kitchen, were the foundation of a meal that felt more like a science experiment than dinner. Floating island dinner, as it was sometimes called, involved poaching eggs in a thin milk broth, then serving them over toast with a dusting of paprika. It was cheap, it was filling, and while it may have looked unusual, it made the most of what families had on hand. Eggs were a working-class staple, packed with protein and relatively inexpensive compared to meat. Poaching them in milk was a way to add richness without using butter or oil, and the broth itself didn't go to waste. It soaked into the toast, creating a soft, custard-like texture that was surprisingly satisfying. Paprika wasn't just for color. It added a hint of warmth and spice to an otherwise mild dish. This kind of meal had roots in old-fashioned frugality. Similar recipes had been around for generations, passed down from an era when every ingredient had to serve a purpose. For kids, it was a bit of a mystery. Why was dinner floating? But for parents, it was an easy, one-pan solution that turned a few simple staples into something warm and nourishing at the end of a long day. The Hungarians really killed it with dinners that shaped our childhood, because we've got another banger on the list. Hungarian goulash was everyone's favorite cozy, hearty meal back in the day. Goulash is a hearty stew whipped up with tender chunks of beef simmered in a rich, savory sauce brimming with paprika. Yeah, paprika was huge back in the day. So why did this delicious dinner vanish from our dinner tables? Well, the Hungarian goulash traces back as far as the 10th century to stews eaten by the shepherds, so you can say this one might just have run its course. But hey, if you're ever craving goulash, dust off some old cookbooks and get to work because it really isn't hard to wump up. This is the perfect dish for a chilly night in, curled up on the couch with a good movie. Just be careful not to spill it on your mom's vintage tablecloth. Those things are irreplaceable. Few side dishes could bridge the gap between savory and sweet as effortlessly as corn pudding. A staple of Southern and Midwestern homecoming dinners, this dish combined farm-fresh simplicity with a rich, custard-like texture. Families often served it alongside roasted meats or holiday spreads, where its golden hue and delicate sweetness made it a comforting favorite. Whether fresh off the cob in the summer or canned in colder months, it was inexpensive and widely available. This recipe used basic pantry staples, butter, milk, eggs, and a touch of sugar to create a dish that felt indulgent despite its humble ingredients. Baking was the preferred method, allowing the custard to set while keeping the kernels tender. Some families swore by a cast iron skillet, while others used deep casserole dishes to achieve that perfect golden crust. Recipes varied. Some included a splash of vanilla, others added a pinch of nutmeg. but the result was always a creamy, spoonable side that paired with almost anything. As processed cornbread mixes and quick-fix alternatives took over, traditional corn pudding was left behind. But for those who remember its warm, velvety bite, it's a dish worth bringing back. Macaroni and tomatoes were a Depression-era classic, simple, humble, and oddly satisfying. This was not pasta. It was just boiled elbow noodles drowning in stewed tomatoes, maybe with a spoonful of butter if you had it. Some families added sugar to cut the acidity, others added salt and pepper and called it gourmet. Either way, it was a bowl of starch and acidity that somehow passed for dinner. You would eat it with a fork because spoons were for people who made soup. Macaroni and tomatoes made no apologies. It was what you threw together when the pantry had almost nothing but cans and carbs. It filled your stomach and quieted the kind of hunger that made your ribs ache. And sometimes, just sometimes, it tasted like home. The sauce stained your bowl orange and clung to the bottom like it wanted to stay. If you ever asked what was for dinner and got this, you knew things were tight. And you also knew not to complain, because no one had time for complaints. You just ate, chewed slow, and wondered how something so bland could feel so familiar. That is what makes it special. It was not delicious, it was dependable. Iron pot split. Pea soup with salted ham hock was the slow-simmered comfort that sustained hunters through the bitterest winter nights. Dried peas soaked in cool water overnight were poured into a heavy pot along with chunks of smoked ham hock and a scattering of onions and carrots. The mixture bubbled gently beside the hearth for hours, the peas breaking down into a creamy base while the pork released deep smoky flavor. The scent filled cabins and canvas tents alike, promising warmth and nourishment when snow drifted high against the walls. Served with coarse bread or a slice of bannock, each bowl offered steady energy for long days of trapping or chopping wood. Children slurped it eagerly, the rich broth clinging to their spoons and warming their hands. This soup required little more than time and patience, yet delivered both comfort and vital strength. Today, quick-dried mixes cannot match the depth of flavor earned by a night of slow cooking over glowing coals and the quiet satisfaction of a meal born from simple ingredients. Field pea salad was a thrifty dish that made the most of seasonal legumes, mixing fresh field peas with peppers, onions, and vinegar. Served chilled, it was a refreshing side for hot southern summers, often brought to church picnics or family reunions. The tang of vinegar balanced the earthiness of the peas, making it both simple and satisfying. Families appreciated it as a cheap, garden-based dish that stretched across gatherings. Children often picked peas from pods, their small hands helping prepare what would later fill large bowls. Field pea salad was more than just food, it represented the connection between gardens and tables, showing how nothing went to waste. Its bright flavors stood out among heavier southern fare, giving balance to meals. Today, it has slipped from popularity, replaced by mayonnaise-heavy salads and modern sides. Forgotten in many kitchens, its memory lingers in old recipe boxes. Field pea salad was proof that even the humblest ingredients could shine when handled with care. Frost grape jam thumbprint. Cookies captured the fleeting sweetness of wild grapes that only reached perfection after the first frost softened their tart skins. Grandmothers ventured into thickets to gather the small, dark clusters, then simmered them into a deep purple jam that filled kitchens with a heady autumn aroma. For the cookies, they prepared a buttery dough, pressing small wells into each round and spooning in the glossy jam before baking. As the cookies cooled, the jam set into jewel-like centers that gleamed against the golden crust. Children loved to help with the thumbprints, their tiny fingerprints leaving a family mark on every treat. These cookies often appeared at holiday gatherings when the weather turned crisp and the harvest season closed, carrying with them the taste of chilly mornings and wood smoke. Frost grape jam. Thumbprint cookies endure as a symbol of resourcefulness and celebration, a sweet way to preserve the last gifts of the wild before winter settled firmly across the southern hills. Tomato gravy and biscuits turned hardship into comfort with every spoonful. When fresh tomatoes ripened or canned ones were on hand, folks would simmer them down with flour bacon grease, and milk until they formed a rich, tangy sauce. Ladled over warm biscuits or rice, it became a hearty breakfast or a quick supper. The flavor was both sharp and smooth, the perfect balance of simple ingredients made grand. It was poor man's luxury, bright with color and full of heart. The gravy clung to every bite like it belonged there. Families gathered around it, talking slow, eating slower, grateful for what little they had. Tomato gravy proved that flavor came from care, not cost, and that the right recipe could lift spirits no matter the season. It was mountain ingenuity at its finest, homemade, humble, and full of soul. When meat was scarce and paychecks had to stretch, dinner often started with one humble ingredient: potatoes. Cheap, filling, and always available, they could be transformed into just about anything. One particularly resourceful creation called Potato Sizzler involved grating them up, frying them in bacon drippings with a handful of onions, and stirring in a beaten egg to bind it all together. Crisp on the edges, hearty in the middle, and packed with smoky flavor, this simple dish had everything it needed to stand on its own as a meal. Bacon itself wasn't always in the budget, but the drippings? Those were liquid gold. Every working-class kitchen had a can of saved bacon grease sitting on the stovetop, ready to add flavor to whatever was cooking. Onions were another staple, cheap and able to stretch even the simplest dish into something satisfying. The egg, whisked in at the last moment, gave the sizzling potatoes just enough structure to hold together, making the meal feel a little more complete. For families who grew up on it, the smell of potatoes frying in a cast-iron skillet brings back memories of home. Stuffed chicken rolls. Don't you dare confuse these with Mickey D's chicken nuggets. Stuffed chicken rolls are the dinner of every kid's dream, 'cause who wouldn't want this cheesy goodness instead of some plain old broccoli soup? Imagine thin sliced chicken breasts pounded to tender perfection, and then filled with a savory mixture of seasoned ground ham and melty cheese. Stuffed chicken rolls are a great way to elevate a simple chicken breast, and they're perfect for a special occasion or a fancy weeknight dinner. They're surprisingly easy to make, so don't be intimidated by their fancy appearance. Despite its appeal, stuffed chicken rolls have become less common as people opt for simpler, quicker meals. This has to be by far one of America's greatest inventions, because even though it has vanished from dinner tables in the States, other nations around the world are devouring them. Once a staple of working-class kitchens, this hearty one-dish meal was built on the kind of ingredients that stretched a family's budget without sacrificing flavor. Cabbage, potatoes, and smoked sausage, three of the most economical and widely available foods, came together in layers, baked slowly in a rich mustard cream sauce. The result was a rustic, deeply satisfying dish that filled bellies and kept families warm through colder months. Cabbage was a practical ingredient, valued for its long shelf life and versatility. When paired with smoky seasoned sausage and starchy potatoes, it created a meal that was both inexpensive and packed with flavor. The mustard-infused cream sauce added a tangy richness, tying everything together. Some home cooks added a dash of vinegar for brightness, while others incorporated cheese for extra indulgence. No matter the variation, this dish was proof that humble ingredients could create something truly special. Why did it fall out of favor? The rise of prepackaged meals and low-carb trends made cabbage-heavy dishes less common, and as quick stovetop meals replaced slow-baked casseroles, this once popular dish faded from view. Liver and onions were the meal that tested your strength. This was not a dinner kids begged for. It was one you survived. A plate of pan-fried beef liver, dark and dense, smothered in soft, translucent onions that were supposed to make it taste better. The smell alone was enough to make you gag. But liver was cheap, it was full of nutrients, and it was not rationed like other cuts during wartime. So you ate it. You cut tiny pieces and tried to swallow without chewing. You drowned it in ketchup or mustard, anything to make it go down faster. Your parents called it good for you. You called it punishment. But there it was, week after week, staring back at you from a chipped plate, while the onions slid around like ghosts. And if you finished it, you felt like you had won something. You had not. But you felt that way. And sometimes that was enough. Wood stove. Corn pone was the quick answer to hunger when daylight faded and work refused to slow. Cornmeal mixed with salt, spring water, and a spoon of rendered fat formed a thick batter spread directly on the hot iron surface of a wood stove. The heat created a crisp crust, while the interior stayed moist and hearty, releasing a toasty aroma that filled the room with anticipation. This simple bread needed no yeast or rising time, making it perfect for weary travelers and families returning from long days in the field. A slice eaten plain carried smoky sweetness, while a dab of wild honey or a drizzle of sorghum turned it into a rare treat. Children loved the crunchy edges and cooks loved the speed, proof that a satisfying meal could be made from the humblest ingredients. Modern ovens may produce perfect loaves, but they cannot capture the flavor of corn pone cooked directly on iron heated by crackling wood, a taste tied forever to the rhythm of frontier evenings. Hominy stew, inspired by native and African influences, was a hearty dish that showcased the South's diverse food routes. Made by simmering hominy corn with pork bones, onions, and peppers, it created a filling stew with smoky depth. It resembled pozole from native traditions, adapted by African-American cooks into regional variations. For rural households, it was an economical way to use cheap cuts and corn, stretching ingredients into something both nourishing and flavorful. Families gathered around bowls of it during cold nights, finding comfort in its simplicity. The dish also carried cultural history, reflecting centuries of blending traditions in Southern kitchens. Each spoonful connected communities across time, reminding people of resilience and shared heritage. Though once widespread, hominy stew has largely vanished from modern tables, overshadowed by canned soups and quicker meals. It remains a dish remembered in pockets of the South, where cooks keep old recipes alive. Its story is one of survival, adaptation, and flavor born from necessity. Fried salt pork with gravy was the kind of meal that stuck to your bones and made you thankful for every bite. Salt pork was cheap and cured, tough until you fried it just right in a black skillet. Once it crisped, the leftover drippings turned into gold, stirred with flour and milk to make creamy white gravy that poured like silk. It covered biscuits, potatoes, or anything else that needed saving from plainness. For mountain folks, this dish turned poverty into pleasure. It filled bellies after long days in the fields and made Sunday mornings smell like grace. Salt pork was often the only meat on the table, but with that gravy, no one minded. The taste was bold, smoky, and honest, like the people who made it. A plate of fried salt pork reminded everyone that ingenuity could feed a family when the cupboard said otherwise. It was poor man's steak with rich man's flavor. Salt-rising bread with bacon drippings offered a rich and rustic loaf that captured the art of natural fermentation long before packaged yeast became common. Grandmothers began the process with a warm starter of cornmeal and scalded milk that sat overnight until wild bacteria created a distinct cheesy aroma. This slow magic produced a dense yet tender bread with a flavor unlike any other, slightly tangy and wonderfully fragrant. To heighten the richness, they brushed the baked loaf with hot bacon drippings, allowing the savory fat to seep into the crust and perfume the kitchen. Families enjoyed thick slices for breakfast with fresh butter, or alongside hearty soups for supper. The bread required patience and trust in tradition, a lesson in letting time and nature do the work. Children woke to the smell of the loaf cooling on the counter, a scent that spoke of skill and heritage. Salt-rising bread with bacon drippings remains a beloved emblem of Southern perseverance and the quiet mastery of age-old kitchen techniques. Stretching ingredients wasn't just a skill in the 1960s, it was a necessity. When a handful of leftover meat and a few vegetables weren't enough for a full meal, they found new life inside a flaky pie crust, topped with a generous layer of mashed potatoes. Hoosier pie supper was an answer to the age-old question: what can we make with what we have? Midwestern families, especially in Indiana, had been making similar dishes for generations, influenced by their farming roots and a deep tradition of waste not cooking. Mashed potatoes were a constant in working-class households, cheap, filling and easy to make in large batches. A single pie could take scraps of roast beef, bits of ham, or even just a few spoonfuls of vegetables and turn them into a meal hearty enough to satisfy a family after a long day's work. It was baked until golden brown, emerging from the oven as a warm, comforting dish that filled the house with a familiar, savory aroma. Served with a ladle of brown gravy, it was about making sure nothing went to waste. In an era where food stretched as far as a paycheck, this dish wasn't just frugal. It was common sense wrapped in a flaky crust. Hear me out, this one might sound a little boring at first glance, but trust me, it's a classic for a reason. The split pea soup is a hearty, filling, and surprisingly healthy-ish, thick, creamy soup packed with vibrant green split peas and other vegetables like carrots, celery, and onions. Now, on that healthy-ish claim, it depends on how much butter and cream your grandma used. The split pea soup is the kind of soup that leaves you feeling satisfied for hours. It has been a St. Patrick's Day staple ever since its origin in 1905. The best part? You can totally customize it according to your liking. Yeah, don't be shy to throw in your favorite veggies, add a splash of lemon juice for a bit of brightness, or even some leftover shredded chicken for an extra protein punch. We really need to bring this one back. Slow cooking was once a necessity, not a luxury. Before pressure cookers and pre-packaged meals, tougher cuts of beef were transformed through hours of gentle simmering, unlocking deep, rich flavors. This smoky chipotle beef ragu was one such dish, a meal that took time but rewarded patience with melt-in-your-mouth tenderness. Chipotle peppers, known for their earthy heat, were a staple in traditional Mexican and Southwestern cooking. But by the mid-20th century, their smoky kick found its way into American kitchens. Paired with tomatoes, garlic, and slow-braised beef, this dish delivered a bold, layered flavor that stood apart from ordinary pot roasts. Served over creamy polenta or even buttered noodles, it was both comforting and deeply satisfying. Despite its rich taste, this meal was surprisingly budget-friendly. Beef chuck or brisket, once some of the most affordable cuts, became tender and flavorful when cooked low and slow. The sauce was built from pantry staples, making it an easy, accessible choice for home cooks. But over time, as quick weeknight meals took priority and polenta lost ground to pasta and rice, this dish faded from dinner tables. Today, Chipotle has seen a resurgence in trendy restaurants, but this home-style beef ragu remains a forgotten classic. Spam and eggs were the emergency dinner that never felt like one. Spam was the meat that came in a tiny rectangular can, and once you heard that suction sound as it slid out, you knew what was coming. You sliced it thick or thin, fried it in a pan until it crisped at the edges, and served it alongside scrambled eggs that may or may not have come from a powder. It was salty, greasy, and surprisingly good, if you grew up eating it, that is. Some people looked down on Spam, but when money was tight, Spam was a lifesaver. It had a long shelf life, required no refrigeration, and could be stretched across several meals. It showed up in casseroles, sandwiches, and stews, but next to eggs, it felt like breakfast for dinner, which somehow made everything okay. You would douse it in ketchup or hot sauce, whatever you had, and you would eat it at a small table with mismatched chairs and flickering lights and think, this could be worse, and it often was. Campfire Dutch oven. Peach cobbler turned rugged campsites into places of sweet reward after days of hard labor. Hunters or homesteaders opened precious cans of peaches saved from summer and poured them into a cast-iron pot, topping them with biscuit dough mixed on the spot. The lid was covered with glowing coals, and the cobbler baked slowly as night settled over the mountains. The scent of fruit and butter rose into the cool air, drawing every tired traveler toward the fire. When the lid lifted, golden crust revealed bubbling peach syrup that dripped onto tin plates. This dessert was more than a treat. It was proof that even in the wilds, a taste of comfort and celebration was possible. Children scraped the pot clean while adults savored the rare sweetness, knowing the peaches might be the only fruit for weeks. Modern camping desserts cannot match the simple magic of cobbler baked under stars with nothing but iron, fire, and patience to guide it. Souse meat was a dish that reflected both thrift and creativity, a cousin to hog's head cheese with its own distinct preparation. It was made from pork scraps, often feet or ears, boiled until tender and then pickled in vinegar with spices. Once cooled and pressed into a loaf, it was sliced and eaten cold with crackers or bread. Families valued it because it used parts of the animal that would otherwise go to waste, stretching limited resources into multiple meals. The tangy, pickled flavor gave it a sharpness that stood out from other pork dishes, making it memorable even if not beloved by everyone. Souse meat was a common sight at butchers and small groceries, sold cheaply to working families. Children often avoided it, but older generations considered it a practical staple. Today, souse meat has nearly vanished, its strong taste and rustic image less appealing to modern palates. Still, it remains a marker of a time when nothing edible was ever discarded. Spider pan. Apple stack delighted families with layers of skillet-fried apples built high like a rustic cake. Grandmothers sliced tart orchard apples thin and cooked them in a heavy spider pan, the old name for a cast-iron skillet with sturdy legs. Each batch was sprinkled with cane sugar and a touch of cinnamon, then carefully stacked while still hot, so the juices melded into a sticky, fragrant tower. The pan sat right on the hearth or over an open flame, filling the room with the comforting scent of caramelized fruit. Served warm, the stack could be sliced like a pie, releasing ribbons of sweet apple syrup with every cut. Children eagerly awaited their turn to watch the apples bubble and to taste the golden edges straight from the pan. Spider pan apple stack reflects the Southern love of cast-iron cooking and the ability to create a show-stopping dessert with nothing more than orchard fruit, patience, and a steady hand at the hearth. At a glance, it looked like fried chicken on a stick. But take one bite, and the secret was out. There wasn't a shred of chicken in sight. In the 1960s, when poultry prices soared, working-class families in industrial cities like Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Detroit turned to a clever alternative: skewered, breaded, and fried pork or veal, known as city chicken. The name was a bit of a joke. Chicken was considered a luxury in certain areas, but pork and veal, those were cheap, especially in regions with a strong meatpacking industry. But appearance mattered, and with a little ingenuity, cubed cuts of meat were threaded onto wooden skewers, giving the illusion of a drumstick. Once dredged in flour, dipped in egg wash, and coated in breadcrumbs, it was pan-fried until golden brown and crispy. Some families took it a step further, baking the skewers in a bit of broth for extra tenderness. Eastern European immigrants had been making versions of it since the early 20th century, and by the 1960s it was a staple at Sunday dinners and potlucks. It might not have been real chicken, but in a time when stretching a dollar mattered more than labels, it didn't need to be. Stuffed peppers. Forget those boring pre-made things you see at the grocery store, because stuffed peppers are here to save the day. We're talking about the beautiful bell peppers Grandma made on Thanksgiving. Vibrant red, yellow, or orange peppers are hand-picked and carefully hollowed out and then stuffed with a flavorful mixture of fluffy rice, seasoned ground meat, and your choice of chopped vegetables. Once stuffed, these peppers are baked to perfection until they are tender and crisp. Now, this isn't just a casual meal. Whipping up a stuffed pepper might make you feel like a master chef in the kitchen. It's also a great way to use up leftover rice and ground meat. Bonus points: if you use their visual appeal to trick your children into getting their daily dose of veggies. Yeah, the little ones don't really go for the green peppers on the table, but they might just love these stuffed peppers. You might even add some cheese to top it off. Unfortunately, it is one of those dishes that has faded from many dinner tables. Before plant-based eating became trendy, hearty vegetarian dishes like this one were a practical necessity. Creamy wild rice and mushroom casserole was a staple in Midwestern and Northern kitchens, especially during the colder months. Packed with earthy flavors and a rich, velvety texture, it was a comforting dish that felt just as satisfying as any meat-based meal. Wild rice, despite its name, isn't actually rice. It's a highly nutritious aquatic grain native to North America. Indigenous tribes harvested it for centuries, and by the mid-20th century, it had found its way into everyday cooking. Though slightly more expensive than white rice, Its nutty flavor and chewy texture made it worth the price. Combined with mushrooms, one of the most affordable and widely available vegetables, this dish was both economical and deeply flavorful. A creamy sauce, often made with milk, butter, and a touch of sherry, tied everything together, creating a casserole that was rich yet wholesome. As convenience foods surged in popularity, canned cream of anything soup replaced homemade sauces, and wild rice was increasingly swapped for cheaper, quicker-cooking grains. Over time, this once-loved casserole became a relic of an era when scratch cooking was the norm. Fried bologna sandwiches were the poor kid's steak. You slapped that bologna in a hot pan until it curled like a rose petal, then threw it on white bread with a smear of mustard. If you were lucky, a slice of cheese made an appearance. If not, the bologna had to carry all the weight. It sizzled, popped, and released that smell. Salty, greasy, unmistakable. There was always that little charred ring around the edge, a perfect halo of survival. This was not deli meat. This was the cheapest pack in the fridge. It came in a big plastic tube, sealed with a twist tie or worse, and you knew it was going to last all week. You did not toast the bread. You barely buttered the pan. The goal was simple: get it hot and slap it together. Sometimes there was ketchup, sometimes a pickle slice. But most times, it was just the basics, a sandwich that told you exactly where you stood. You sat on the floor or leaned over the sink while you ate it, grease dripping down your hand, and never questioned why this was a staple. Because it worked, and because it was yours. Trapper's pemmican was the ultimate trail ration, dense and enduring, a food designed to keep travelers alive across endless miles of rough terrain. Hunters dried lean strips of game meat in open air or smokehouses until every trace of moisture vanished, then pounded them with stones into a fine powder. Dried berries such as chokecherries were crushed and mixed with the meat before hot rendered fat bound it all into a solid mass. Packed into rawhide bags, pemmican could last for months without spoiling, providing a powerful balance of protein and energy that fueled trappers through snowstorms and long hunts. Small pieces were eaten as is, while larger chunks could be boiled with water to create a quick stew on frigid nights. It required no fire, no cooking, only careful preparation and respect for survival knowledge passed from indigenous peoples to the mountain men who adopted it. Few modern snacks carry such history or concentrated strength, a reminder that the simplest ingredients once meant the difference between life and death on the frontier. Scuppernong grape jelly was a staple of homesteads across the South, made from wild, bronze-colored grapes native to the region. Families harvested scuppernongs in late summer, cooking them down with sugar to create a sweet, musky jelly. It was spread thick on biscuits, cornbread, or fresh loaves, bringing the taste of the season into the pantry. Children often helped pick the grapes, staining their hands and lips as they filled baskets. For many, it was less about the jelly itself and more about the ritual of gathering and preserving together. This homemade preserve tied households to the land, with each jar holding the essence of place and memory. Scuppernong jelly was also shared among neighbors, reflecting community bonds built around food. Today, it has become rare, replaced by store-bought jams and the fading of foraging traditions. Its decline marks a quiet loss of self-sufficiency and regional pride. Forgotten on most tables, it remains a sweet symbol of Southern ingenuity and heritage. Beans and taters were what kept mountain families going when there was little else to count on, the kind of meal that stretched far and satisfied deep. Pinto beans simmered low and long, softening with salt, fatback, or even just water when meat was short. Meanwhile, potatoes waited nearby, boiled, mashed, or fried crisp to turn a pot of beans into a full supper. Together, they made a plate that felt heavier than hunger and warmer than hardship. The beans brought body, the potatoes brought comfort, and the combination brought peace after long days. Mountain folks never needed fancy seasonings or sides. They just needed food that filled and soothed. Children knew the smell of beans simmering before they even came through the door. It was the smell of stability, of knowing you would eat, even in hard years. Beans and taters taught patience, gratitude, and the quiet pride that comes from surviving together. It was more than supper. It was a ritual that reminded families what mattered. Every forkful told the same story. Work hard, share what you have, and be thankful for enough. It was food for living, not showing off, and no one ever left hungry. Black walnut vinegar pie offered a bold finish to any meal with its intriguing mix of sharpness and deep sweetness. Grandmothers whipped eggs, sorghum syrup, and aged black walnut vinegar into a dark filling that baked into a glossy, fragrant pie. The vinegar cut through the richness, highlighting the earthy flavor of the walnuts while leaving a gentle tang on the tongue. Served slightly warm, the pie balanced sweet and sour in a way that surprised guests and delighted those accustomed to more traditional desserts. The recipe required patience, as black walnuts demanded careful cracking, and the vinegar needed months to develop its complex character. Families who tasted this pie remembered it as a treat reserved for holidays or important gatherings, a dessert that told of long preparation and old-world skill. Black walnut vinegar pie endures as a testament to the resourcefulness of Southern grandmothers who knew how to transform humble ingredients into a sophisticated dessert that lingered in memory long after the last slice disappeared. Long before store-bought bread was an everyday staple, cornmeal was the backbone of many working-class meals. Cheap, shelf-stable, and endlessly versatile, it found its way into countless recipes, none more practical than corn dodgers. These simple golden brown dumplings were either fried to crisp perfection or baked until firm, then served with a drizzle of syrup or a pat of butter. Corn dodgers were a direct descendant of Depression-era survival cooking, when wheat flour was too expensive for daily use. Cornmeal, on the other hand, was affordable and widely available, especially in the South and Midwest. Mixed with a little water, salt, and sometimes a splash of milk, it formed a dough sturdy enough to hold its shape in the frying pan. The result was a crispy on the outside, tender on the inside bite of pure comfort. Paired with a bit of molasses or honey, whatever was on hand, it became a meal that kids actually looked forward to. Some families made them dense and chewy, while others leaned toward a lighter, almost hush-puppy-like texture. However they were served, one thing was certain. Corn dodgers proved that even the simplest ingredients could be transformed into something satisfying. No frills, no waste, just good, honest food. Tuna noodle casserole was the king of kitchen creativity. If you had a can of tuna, a box of noodles, and a single can of soup, you had dinner. This was the casserole that held families together after World War II, the kind of meal that said, "We are broke, but we still eat warm." You dumped the noodles in boiling water, stirred in the tuna, and cracked open that can of cream of mushroom soup like it was the secret to survival. It all went into one big dish, mixed until gray and gloppy, then topped with whatever crunch you could find. Maybe crushed potato chips, maybe stale breadcrumbs. If you were lucky, a little shredded cheese. But that was rare. Tuna noodle casserole was not supposed to taste good. It was supposed to be enough. And it was. It warmed up the house and made it smell like something was baking. That mattered more than you think. Sometimes it fed 6 people on $3. Sometimes you made it again the next day with what was left in the pan. It was frugal, filling, and strangely comforting. And if you grew up poor, it probably sat in front of you more times than you care to admit, steam rising off the top like it was proud to be what it was. Corn dodger cakes were dense patties of cornmeal fried in bacon grease, built to endure long hunts and endless trails. Trappers stirred ground corn with hot water and a touch of salt, shaping the mixture into thick rounds that held together without eggs or milk. Dropped into sizzling grease, they crisped on the outside while staying firm inside, creating a portable bread that resisted spoilage. Wrapped in cloth, the cakes traveled in saddlebags and coat pockets, ready to be eaten cold or warmed briefly over a fire. Their sturdy texture and rich smoky flavor gave quick energy to hunters crossing ridges or rivers. Many men claimed the taste improved after a day in the pack as the bacon fat soaked deeper into the corn. At night, the cake served as both side dish and main meal when meat was scarce. Today, the name survives mostly in old stories, but the hearty crunch of a true corn dodger remains a symbol of rugged independence and frontier practicality. Beni seed cookies were small, nutty treats rooted in Gullah culture, treasured for both flavor and symbolism. Made with beni seeds, a type of sesame brought from Africa, these cookies were crisp, lightly sweet, and full of heritage. They were often baked for holidays, celebrations, or as gifts, carrying meaning beyond the plate. For generations, families passed down recipes, with each batch representing resilience and tradition. Children eagerly waited for them at special gatherings, their delicate crunch setting them apart from ordinary sweets. Unlike store-bought cookies, beni seed cookies carried the weight of ancestry, a taste tied to identity. They showcased how African ingredients shaped Southern foodways in lasting ways. Today, they are rarely made outside of dedicated cultural circles or festivals, overshadowed by more mainstream desserts. Their absence reflects not just a shift in taste, but a loss of connection to history. Forgotten by many, beni seed cookies remain a culinary treasure worth remembering for their story as much as their flavor. Creekbank smoked eels celebrated the quiet abundance of southern waterways, where families fished for more than just sport. Grandmothers cleaned freshly caught eels, rubbed them with salt and wild herbs, and hung them over smoldering hardwood fires along the creek's edge. Hours of slow smoking transformed the firm flesh into something tender and richly flavored with wood smoke and earth. Served alongside hot cornbread and a simple salad of foraged greens, the eel became a centerpiece that surprised those unfamiliar with its delicate taste. Children learned both fishing skills and respect for the land as they watched the careful preparation. This meal reflected a time when local rivers and creeks provided not only recreation but reliable sustenance. Creekbank smoked eel remains a vivid memory of evenings spent near moving water, when the fading light and curling smoke marked the rhythm of family life and the enduring connection between Southern kitchens and the natural world that surrounded them. Hog maw and potatoes was one of those meals that proved nothing went to waste in a true hillbilly kitchen. The pig's stomach, cleaned and stuffed with diced potatoes, onions, and spices, was baked slow until the filling turned soft and savory. It was not a dish for the faint of heart, but for those who understood the value of every part of the animal, it was a delicacy. The skin crisped at the edges, sealing in the flavor of the simple stuffing inside. What others might have thrown away, mountain families turned into supper. The smell that filled the house was rich, earthy, and unforgettable. Plates were cleaned, not because of hunger alone, but out of respect for the effort behind it. Hog maw and potatoes taught a lesson about gratitude and grit. That waste was a luxury poor folks could never afford. It was born from necessity but perfected through pride. For those who grew up with it, no feast ever tasted quite as real. Mid-century America had a love affair with convenience, and nothing sold homemakers on a recipe faster than a catchy advertising campaign. In the 1960s, Wesson Oil promoted a dish that promised flavor, affordability, and, of course, a little Wessonality. It started with ground beef, one of the most budget-friendly proteins of the era, mixed with canned green beans and tomato soup, then topped with a generous handful of crushed potato chips. A little crunch, a little sauce, and a whole lot of practicality. Wessonality Surprise was designed for speed and efficiency. No complicated steps, no long cooking times, just a few pantry staples thrown together and baked into something that resembled a casserole. Canned green beans, already a staple in American kitchens, made the dish feel like a balanced meal, while the condensed tomato soup added a rich, slightly sweet tang. For families in the 60s, this kind of cooking was about making every dollar count. It was fast, it was filling, and thanks to Wesson's marketing, it became one of many quirky ad-driven meals that defined a generation of home cooking. A little strange? Maybe. But for busy families, it worked. Fish sticks and macaroni and cheese was the dinner you got when your mom had $5, 20 minutes, and nothing left to give. The fish sticks came from the freezer aisle, packed in a cardboard box with a picture that made them look golden and crispy, but never did justice to the soggy reality. You lined them on a baking sheet and hoped they would brown, even though the oven was spotty and the heat uneven. Then came the macaroni, bright orange and neon from a powdered cheese packet, boiled until it was soft enough to forget where it came from. You stirred the cheese in with butter, or maybe just milk if the butter was gone. And there it was, a plate that was hot, fast, and filling. You did not question if the fish was really fish. You dipped it in ketchup or tartar sauce and made peace with the crunch or the lack of it. The macaroni clung to your fork like it knew its job was to comfort. This was a Thursday night meal, a "we'll go shopping tomorrow" meal, a "you're still growing" meal. It was not gourmet, but it was enough. Enough to fill you, enough to get by. Coffee-boiled beef turned the toughest cuts of meat into tender, flavorful dinners using an ingredient always present in a trapper's pack. Hunters browned the beef lightly, then poured in strong black coffee instead of water, letting the liquid work as both tenderizer and flavoring agent. As the meat simmered for hours, the coffee's bitterness mellowed into a deep, smoky richness that mingled with garlic, onions, and a pinch of salt. The result was beef that melted beneath a fork, infused with a subtle roasted taste unlike any ordinary stew. Around the fire, travelers relished the aroma that promised warmth and strength after long days of hauling gear or setting traps. This clever use of a morning staple showed how frontier cooks wasted nothing and found new purposes for familiar supplies. Today, the idea of simmering beef in coffee might surprise modern palates, but for mountain men, it was a trusted method that turned simple camp rations into a meal both satisfying and unexpectedly refined in its layered flavors. Blackberry dumplings were once a highlight of southern summers, made when berries ripened along hedgerows and farm fields. Families would gather buckets of wild blackberries, then stew them with sugar until they formed a sweet, fragrant sauce. Into this bubbling mixture, cooks dropped spoonfuls of simple dough that puffed into soft dumplings as they simmered. The result was a dessert that was both filling and joyful, capturing the taste of summer in every bite. Children loved helping pick berries, often sneaking handfuls as they worked, while adults valued the chance to turn free fruit into a crowd pleaser. Blackberry dumplings were often served with milk or cream if available, making them even more indulgent. They were the kind of dish that brought neighbors together, with everyone pitching in during harvest. Today, they have nearly vanished, replaced by store-bought pies and packaged desserts. Their disappearance is a loss of flavor and tradition, because blackberry dumplings carried with them the sweetness of both the land and the season. Possum and sweet potatoes was the kind of backwoods dinner that kept families fed through the leanest winters. When hunting was luck and store meat was too dear, possum became fair game, slow roasted in the hearth until tender and rich. Paired with syrupy baked sweet potatoes, the dish filled the kitchen with a deep, smoky aroma that wrapped around every soul inside. The meat's wild flavor was softened by the caramel sweetness of the potatoes, balancing the meal just right. No one cooked it for show. It was made from necessity and served with pride. In those hills, feeding your family meant using what the woods offered, without apology or waste. Preparing it took skill, patience, and courage, the kind born from survival, not luxury. Each bite carried the taste of the land, wild and honest as the people who cooked it. For visitors, it was daring. For locals, it was life. Possum and sweet potatoes told the story of mountain living, rough, resourceful, and full of heart. It was food that asked nothing fancy, only respect for what was given and gratitude for what it provided. Scrapple was traditionally a way to use up leftover pork scraps, but when meat was scarce or too expensive, another version took its place, one that relied on sweet potatoes and cornmeal instead. Sweet potato scrapple kept the same fried, crispy on the outside, soft on the inside texture, but swapped out meat for mashed sweet potatoes, mixed with cornmeal and spices, then molded into a loaf and sliced before frying. It was simple, cheap, and packed with enough flavor to make you forget there wasn't any pork in sight. Sweet potatoes were a southern staple, affordable, nutritious, and easy to grow. Unlike white potatoes, they had a natural sweetness that made them versatile in both savory and sweet dishes. Combined with cornmeal, another low-cost kitchen essential, they created a filling, hearty meal that could be eaten on its own or served with eggs for breakfast. Seasonings varied by household. Some added cinnamon for warmth, others leaned into salt and pepper for a more savory bite. Families who grew up eating it remember the unmistakable sound of slices sizzling in a hot pan, the edges crisping up to golden perfection. Cheesy ham chowder. This creamy soup is a winter wonderland in a bowl. Imagine tender chunks of ham in a rich and creamy broth loaded with potatoes, carrots, and other colorful vegetables. The secret weapon of this chowder? The generous amount of melty cheese takes the flavor to a whole new level. This soup is like your best friend on snow days. It's also a great way to use up leftover ham from the holidays. Just be careful not to burn your tongue. This cheesy chowder is addictive. This dish might sound fancy, but don't let the French name fool you. Chicken a la king is a creamy and delicious casserole that's surprisingly easy to make. Yeah, tender chicken pieces in a rich cream sauce with mushrooms, peas, and pimientos? Count me in. This casserole is typically served over rice or toast and is a reminder that classics never truly goes out of style. It's just not as popular as it was back in the day because you know what they say, all good things come to an end. But chicken a la king doesn't have to. It's too good to become a memory of the past. So, next time you're looking for a nostalgic and delicious meal, give this dish a try. So did any of these classic beloved dinners stir up tasty memories? If so, like this video, click subscribe, and stay tuned for more nostalgia trips. Egg salad sandwiches were the soft answer to a hard life. You started with boiled eggs, cheap, filling, easy to store. You mashed them with a fork, added whatever mayonnaise you had, maybe a pinch of salt, a dash of pepper, sometimes even mustard if you were fancy. Then came the white bread, thin and fragile, sticking to the egg like it was doing you a favor. It was cold, quiet food. Not flashy, not warm, not especially comforting. But it filled the space between hunger and dinner. You ate it standing up over the sink or wrapped in wax paper at school. There was no crust if someone loved you. There was extra egg if someone loved you more. It was the lunch of the working poor, the dinner of those too tired to cook, and somehow it still managed to taste like home. The eggs were never just eggs. They were patience. They were leftovers. They were something made out of almost nothing. And when the fridge was empty except for a carton and a jar of mayonnaise, you knew what you were having. You did not choose it. You inherited it. Forager's mushroom. Ragu transformed a handful of wild mushrooms into a meal that tasted of deep forest soil and clean rain. Hunters gathered chanterelles, morels, or other seasonal finds at first light, brushing off pine needles and slicing them into rustic pieces. In a heavy skillet, they melted bacon fat with garlic and wild onions until the fragrance filled the clearing, then tossed in the mushrooms to sear and release their earthy juices. A splash of spring water or a spoon of cream, if available, created a silky sauce that clung to each tender bite. Served over bread or with a side of roasted roots, the ragu delivered warmth and rich umami to those who spent their days in silence among towering trees. This dish celebrated knowledge of the land, for it required careful identification and respect for nature's offerings. Modern cooks may buy farmed mushrooms year-round, but they cannot capture the sense of discovery and quiet reward that came from gathering a meal straight from the shadowed floor of the wilderness. Cabbage and noodles, haluski if your grandma called it that, was a gift from the old country wrapped in poverty. You boiled egg noodles until they were soft, but not mush. You fried cabbage and onions in butter or oil until they collapsed into golden ribbons. Then you tossed it all together and prayed the flavor was enough. It was peasant food, proudly so. Born from resourcefulness, not recipes. Even when money vanished, this meal stayed dependable, like a friend who never left. It was not pretty, and it did not try to be. Just beige on beige with a hint of steam. But it filled the house with the kind of smell that made you feel like someone was taking care of you. Even if that someone was just you, doing your best. The dish had roots in Eastern Europe, but in American kitchens it became something else. An immigrant memory passed down through empty cupboards and tight budgets. You could eat a giant plate for under $1 and still feel like you ate something real. Because you did. Fried catfish roe was once a prized seasonal delicacy in southern fishing communities, celebrated for its crisp texture and savory flavor. When fishermen brought in catfish, nothing was wasted, and the roe was dredged in cornmeal and fried until golden. It was often served alongside hush puppies or simple greens, making a meal that felt indulgent despite its humble origins. Families valued it as a rare treat tied to the rhythms of the river, where seasonal catches dictated what appeared on the table. Children grew up with memories of this dish as a reward for long days spent fishing with parents or grandparents. It reflected a time when local waters directly fed households and traditions. Today, fried catfish roe has nearly disappeared, pushed aside by changing tastes and concerns about sourcing. Few restaurants still serve it, and many younger Southerners have never tasted it. Its loss marks a fading link between people and the waterways that once sustained them, leaving it more a memory than a menu item. Chicken and slick dumplings were the mountain way of turning one bird into a feast that fed everyone around the table. A single chicken simmered down into a rich broth that filled the house with the smell of Sunday comfort. Thin dumplings rolled by hand replaced fancy noodles, soaking up every drop of flavor and thickening the stew into a creamy, heartwarming dish. The bits of tender chicken floated among the slick dumplings like treasure pieces in gravy. This was not a meal of plenty, but one of patience, pride, and clever hands. Appalachian cooks knew how to stretch what they had until it felt like abundance. Steam rose from the pot like a promise that no one would go hungry tonight. Every bowl felt earned, heavy, and satisfying in the way only home cooking can be. The leftovers, if any, tasted richer by morning. Chicken and slick dumplings turned scarcity into celebration, hardship into comfort, and hunger into harmony. It was food for body and soul alike. Even today, that first spoonful carries the same truth. It does not take much to make a meal worth remembering when it is made with care and love. In the Appalachian Mountains, resourcefulness was a way of life. When fresh food wasn't always guaranteed, families learned how to make the most of what they had, and that's where soured corn soup came in. This dish started with dried corn that had been left to ferment slightly, giving it a tangy depth of flavor. Simmered with onions and a chunk of fatback, it transformed into a rich, hearty soup that was as practical as it was unique. Corn was the backbone of Appalachian cooking, grown in backyard gardens and stored for winter months. Allowing it to sour slightly wasn't a mistake. It was a method passed down for generations, a natural way to enhance flavor when refrigeration wasn't an option. Fatback, a common cut of cured pork, added just enough richness to make the dish feel substantial, while onions provided a little sweetness to balance out the tang. This wasn't the kind of soup you'd find in a restaurant, but for mountain families, it was a familiar and comforting meal. Some grew up eating it with cornbread on the side, others with a spoon straight from the pot. Back in the 1950s, the Divan Parisian restaurant at Chatham Hotel in New York City gave birth to its signature dish, the Chicken Divan Casserole. This mouth-watering dish soon found its way to all our homes, and I'm not complaining. It's made of tender chicken pieces nestled amongst vibrant green broccoli florets in a rich and creamy sauce, topped with a generous layer of melty cheese and a sprinkle of crispy breadcrumbs. The chef who leaked this recipe out to the public really took one for the team, and we can never thank him enough. It's the perfect combination of protein, veggies, and all the cheesy goodness your heart desires. Just maybe pair it with a side salad to pretend you're being healthy. Chicken Divan Casserole is the retro dish of every cheese lover's dreams, and you know what that calls for? A comeback. It's a classic at throwback parties, but you don't really need an excuse to cook this up. A typical Tuesday night works too. For families stretching their grocery budget, few meals delivered as much flavor and comfort as these unusual-looking meatballs. A product of the Great Depression and wartime rationing, porcupine meatballs were a creative way to make ground beef go further. Mixing rice into the meat wasn't just for texture. It bulked up the meal, making a pound of beef feed more mouths. Rice was an affordable pantry staple, and when the meatballs simmered in a tangy tomato sauce, the grains softened and expanded, giving them their signature spiky appearance. Despite the name, no porcupines were harmed in the making of this dish. Just a bit of kitchen ingenuity at work. Some recipes used canned tomato soup for a mild, creamy sauce, while others relied on crushed tomatoes and Worcestershire sauce for a sharper kick. Either way, the slow cooking process allowed the flavors to meld into a hearty, stick-to-your-ribs meal. For decades, this dish was a go-to for busy home cooks. It was easy, required minimal ingredients, and could be made in one pot, ideal for feeding a growing family. But as convenience foods and pre-made meatballs filled grocery store freezers, the homemade version started to disappear. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were the sweet spot between hunger and childhood. No stove, no knife skills, no effort. Just 2 slices of white bread, 1 spread of peanut butter, 1 of jelly, smashed together until they stuck. You did not toast it, you did not plate it. You wrapped it in napkins or ate it straight from the counter. It was cheap, it was fast, and it was always there. The peanut butter clung to the roof of your mouth. The jelly ran down your fingers, and somehow you never minded. It felt like a treat even though it was a budget lifeline. You ate it when the pantry was bare and the lunchbox had to look full. You ate it at home, at school, and on car rides when the air conditioning did not work. It was portable, durable, and forgivable. No one asked questions if that was your meal again, because everyone understood. It was the great equalizer of being broke. No leftovers, no dishes, just sweetness, salt, and survival on sliced bread. Mountain Man breakfast skillet greeted dawn with a hearty mix designed to carry workers through the toughest day. Potatoes diced small fried first in bacon grease until edges turned crisp, followed by onions, peppers, and scraps of last night's venison or elk. Finally, eggs were cracked directly into the sizzling mixture, their yolks mingling with the rich drippings to coat every bite. The aroma filled the campsite long before the sun crested the peaks, drawing even the most exhausted hunter from his blanket. This breakfast was never fancy but always reliable, offering protein, starch, and fat in perfect balance for long hikes or chopping wood. Families sitting near the fire shared the skillet straight from the pan, passing wooden forks and stories as steam curled into the morning air. Today, diners serve similar dishes, but the true Mountain Man version carries the unmistakable taste of open flame and fresh game, a flavor of pure endurance that cannot be recreated by any restaurant range or packaged seasoning mix. Hogshead cheese was a dish that made full use of an animal, born from nose-to-tail traditions where nothing could be wasted. Despite its name, it contained no cheese at all, but was instead a cold cut made by boiling the head of a pig with spices, onions, and vinegar until the meat and gelatin formed a solid loaf. Once chilled, it was sliced and served cold, often with crackers or bread. For rural Southerners, Hogshead cheese was practical, economical, and surprisingly flavorful. It reflected a time when families valued every scrap and could not afford to throw anything away. Children might have balked at the idea, but many adults treasured its rich taste. Hogshead cheese was also sold in local butcher shops and became a staple of working-class lunches. Today, it is rare to find outside specialty stores or heritage festivals, its strong flavor and rustic origins falling out of favor. Still, it tells the story of thrift, resilience, and respect for every part of the hog. Fried catfish with hush puppies was a supper that tasted like the river itself. Fishermen brought home catfish from muddy banks, cleaning and breading them in cornmeal before frying them crisp in hot grease. The fillets sizzled golden, their flaky flesh tender beneath the crust. Alongside came hush puppies, little cornmeal balls fried in the same skillet, crunchy on the outside and soft inside. A few onion slices and a drizzle of vinegar finished the plate. This was food for Fridays, for family gatherings, for long days rewarded by full bellies. It carried the sound of crickets and the smell of the water, the feeling of summer nights on the porch. Fried catfish was not just a meal, it was a memory that tasted like laughter, hard work, and still water. In every bite, there was pride in what was caught, cooked, and shared without waste. It was country living at its most honest, simple, and complete. Bologna wasn't just for sandwiches. When money was tight and meat had to be stretched, it found its way into all kinds of meals, including breakfast, where it was ground up, fried, and turned into a creamy, savory gravy. Poured over biscuits or a few slices of white bread, ground Bologna gravy took one of the cheapest meats on the market and transformed it into something warm, filling, and satisfying. Bologna had long been a go-to protein for working-class families. Made from a mix of leftover meat trimmings, it was significantly cheaper than fresh cuts of beef or pork, but still packed enough flavor to carry a dish. Frying it first gave it a crispy, caramelized edge, while the addition of milk and flour turned it into a rich, hearty gravy. Served over whatever bread was available, it became a meal that could keep a family going through the day. For those who grew up eating it, the smell of sizzling bologna in a cast-iron skillet brings back memories of weekend breakfasts and weekday suppers alike. It wasn't fancy, but that wasn't the point. It was resourcefulness at its best, a way to take something simple and turn it into comfort food with just a few basic ingredients and a little time at the stove. Before slow cookers and instant meals, there was fricassee, a dish that turned simple ingredients into something extraordinary. This creamy chicken stew had roots in European cooking, but became a homecoming dinner favorite in American kitchens, especially in the South and Midwest. It was rich, comforting, and made the most of what was available. Chicken fricassee was the perfect example of resourceful cooking. In the days when whole chickens were bought instead of pre-cut parts, every bit was used. The meat was gently simmered in a velvety sauce made from broth, butter, and cream, creating a dish that felt indulgent without being expensive. Paired with dumplings or rice, it was a filling meal that stretched to feed a crowd. What made fricassee special was its balance between rustic and refined. Unlike fried or roasted chicken, this method kept the meat exceptionally tender, absorbing the sauce's deep flavors. Some families added carrots and peas, while others preferred a touch of sherry for extra depth. But no matter the variation, it was a dish meant to be ladled generously and served with warm, crusty bread. So why did it disappear? As boneless, skinless chicken breasts became the norm, slow-cooked dishes like this fell out of favor. Goulash was not Hungarian, not the kind we grew up with. This was American goulash, elbow macaroni, ground beef, and a tomato sauce that always tasted a little like metal. It was a one-pot meal, no rules, just a way to take cheap ingredients and turn them into something that could feed a small army. Some families used onions, others added garlic if they had it. But at its core, it was just meat, pasta, and sauce. And it was enough. You could scoop it out in huge portions and still have leftovers. It reheated well. It was easy to make. And most importantly, it was cheap. Goulash was the dinner you made when you could not afford variety. It was everything in one dish. And it worked. You knew it was going to be a goulash night when the cupboards were getting low and the mood in the house was just a little more tired. But somehow that big pot of steaming pasta made things feel okay. For one night at least. Molasses glazed ham scraps were the second act for leftovers that never went to waste, a way of turning thrift into pure delight. Bits of ham saved from Sunday dinner were brushed with thick, dark molasses and crisped in a skillet until their edges sizzled and caramelized. The glaze turned ordinary scraps glossy and rich, sweet meeting salt in a perfect mountain harmony. It might have been a meal made from leftovers, but it smelled like something meant for celebration. Served with hot biscuits, wilted greens, or mashed taters, it was enough to make a small kitchen feel abundant again. Folks in the hills did not waste a thing. They reused every bite, every drop, and every ounce of effort. The sound of that sizzling pan was music to anyone who worked for their food. Each piece of glazed ham carried more than flavor. It carried gratitude. The molasses softened the salty edges, creating a sticky sweetness that felt like kindness on a plate. It was living proof that a meal could be poor in ingredients yet rich in spirit. In every bite was a memory of hard work turned to reward, and no one ever left hungry. Television dinners were what happened when the future met the food budget. Frozen meals in foil trays, stacked in the freezer like little time capsules of convenience. Salisbury steak, mashed potatoes, peas or corn, A square of apple cobbler that always burned your tongue. You pulled it from the box, popped it in the oven, and waited. No prep, no planning. Just peel back the foil and pretend you were eating like everyone else. These dinners were born in the 1950s, but they stuck around because they made sense. Especially when you worked late or your parents were too tired to cook, or there just was not enough of anything to make a real meal. The food never looked like the picture. But it was hot. It had variety. It felt like a feast when you only expected a sandwich. You ate it in front of the television, a tray on your lap, the glow of the screen making it all feel a little more okay. These dinners were never about flavor, they were about escape. When dinner had to come together fast and money was tight, there was one golden rule. Nothing went to waste. Leftover potatoes, stray bits of meat, a spoonful of peas from last night's dinner, it all had a place in the baking dish. Held together with a can of condensed soup or a ladle of thick gravy, garbage plate casserole was less about following a recipe and more about cleaning out the fridge. Working-class families in the 1960s didn't have the luxury of throwing away food, and casseroles like this turned scraps into something filling. Canned soups, especially cream of mushroom or cream of chicken, were kitchen workhorses, stretching ingredients while adding richness. Crackers or breadcrumbs on top gave it that familiar golden crust, making it feel like a meal rather than a collection of leftovers. It was never the same dish twice, but that was part of its charm. One night it might taste like last Sunday's roast beef. The next, it had the essence of yesterday's pork chops. No one knew exactly what they were going to get, but that didn't matter. It was warm, it was filling, and most importantly, it was a reminder that a little creativity could turn scraps into supper. Porcupine meatballs sounded fun, until you realized the only thing spiky about them was the desperation they were made from. These were meatballs born in the hard times, made by mixing ground beef with uncooked rice to stretch every last ounce of protein. They simmered in tomato sauce, and as the rice cooked, it poked out like little white quills. That is where the name came from, someone trying to make poverty sound cute. But if you grew up poor, you know this was not about being clever. It was about making half a pound of ground beef feed a family of 5. They were fragile little things, barely holding together, and often baked in the oven or cooked in a pan until the sauce bubbled up like lava. The tomato sauce was always the cheapest kind, canned, oversalted, and slightly metallic. But it masked the blandness, and that was the goal. Sometimes people added onions or eggs if they had them. Most of the time, it was just the basics: rice, meat, and sauce. Dinner done cheap. If you ever sat at the table with 3 meatballs and a slice of bread, you knew what this meal meant. It was survival with a side of improvisation. Beaver tail roast brought rich, savory fat to camps that relied on resourcefulness and respect for every animal taken. After a successful trapping day, hunters skinned the thick, paddle-shaped tail and cleaned it carefully before laying it over a bed of hot embers. As the outer layer blistered and crisped, the inner fat softened into a silky texture prized for both flavor and sustenance. The roasting scent mingled with wood smoke, signaling a feast that offered rare richness during long, cold nights. Slices of the tender interior were served plain or with a pinch of salt, each bite delivering warmth and calories that no lean cut of meat could match. Trappers often shared this delicacy as a sign of camaraderie and gratitude for a successful catch. Though modern diets rarely include such fare, those who tasted the smoky, buttery meat remembered it as an unmatched wilderness luxury, a dish that turned the hard work of the trap line into a celebratory meal that honored the animal and the skill of the hunter. Okra and tomatoes with rice was a classic side dish that thrived in southern kitchens, blending garden staples into a filling, flavorful plate. Fresh okra was sliced and stewed with tomatoes, onions, and sometimes bacon fat, then spooned generously over rice. It was inexpensive and wholesome, relying on vegetables that were easy to grow in the southern climate. For families, it was a dependable dish that appeared at weeknight dinners, Sunday suppers, and potlucks alike. The combination of tangy tomatoes and tender okra gave it a unique texture and taste that many children learned to love, even if reluctantly at first. Rice made it hearty enough to stand alone when meat was scarce, adding value to a humble dish. Though once celebrated, it has slowly faded as processed foods and fast meals replaced traditional garden cooking. Today, it is remembered mainly in rural kitchens or cookbooks. Okra and tomatoes with rice remains a snapshot of how Southern cooks turned simple harvests into comfort. Cold ash. Honey custard demonstrated a gentle cooking method that used the fading warmth of a hearth long after the fire died down. Grandmothers prepared a simple mixture of milk, farm eggs, and golden honey, then poured it into heavy earthenware crocks. These were buried in the cooled ashes of the fireplace where the slow, even heat coaxed the custard to a silky set overnight. By morning, the crocks emerged with a faint smoky aroma and a texture as smooth as velvet. Families woke to the subtle scent of honey and ash, a quiet reward for patience and careful tending. The technique required no active fire and no costly equipment, only the wisdom to harness lingering warmth. Cold ash honey custard remains a beautiful example of resourceful cooking, where nature's gentle heat and a grandmother's steady hand turned a few simple ingredients into a breakfast or dessert that tasted of hearth and home and the comforting rhythm of a fire that never truly sleeps. Cabbage and ham hock soup was the kind of dinner that filled both bellies and souls when times were thin and money ran out. The hock, tough and bony but rich with hidden flavor, simmered for hours until the meat fell away and the broth turned smoky. Chopped cabbage leaves, onions, and potatoes joined the pot, soaking up the taste that only slow cooking and patience could bring. The kitchen filled with steam and scent, proof that comfort was brewing even without much to spare. It was not fancy, but it fed families for days and cost next to nothing. In mountain kitchens, the secret was never waste. It was making do and making magic from scraps. The sound of the spoon scraping the pot was the sound of gratitude itself. Every bowl carried the story of thrift and resilience. A steaming ladle served on a cold evening felt like victory over hardship. Even with little meat, the broth was rich, the cabbage sweet, and the memory lasting. Ham hock soup reminded everyone that love and labor make the best seasoning of all. It was humble food, but it held more comfort than gold ever could. Not every seafood dish came from the ocean. Some came straight from a can. In a time when fresh shrimp was a luxury for coastal towns, canned shrimp offered an affordable way for working-class families to bring a little seafood into their diets. Mixed with peas in a thick, creamy white sauce and served over crackers or toast, this dish had a playful name, Shrimp Wiggle. But it was all business when it came to stretching ingredients. Canned shrimp had been around since the early 20th century, marketed as a convenient alternative to fresh shellfish. By the 1960s, it found its way into all kinds of home-cooked meals, from salads to casseroles. In this dish, it was combined with a simple white sauce, a budget-friendly staple made from butter, flour, and milk that turned just about anything into a filling, stick-to-your-ribs meal. The peas added a pop of color and a bit of sweetness, balancing out the richness of the sauce. Served over saltines or toasted white bread, it wasn't fancy, but it was warm, comforting, and familiar. For many kids, it was their first introduction to seafood, whether they liked it or not. Some remember it fondly, while others never quite warmed up to the idea of shrimp that came from a can. Fried potatoes and onions were the poor man's hash, a skillet full of sizzling honesty. You sliced the potatoes thin, tossed them in a pan with oil or bacon grease, and added onions until the whole house smelled like something was finally cooking. It was loud, smoky, and always worth the wait. The edges got crispy, the centers stayed soft, and the onions caramelized just enough to make you forget there was no meat. There was no recipe, just instinct and repetition, the kind passed down by watching, not reading. One pan, one burner, and the hope that there was enough to go around. You flipped it with whatever spatula had not melted yet, served it right out of the pan, and ate it fast before the crisp turned to mush. This was breakfast, lunch, or dinner, whatever you needed it to be. You could dress it up with ketchup or cheese or just eat it plain. No one judged. It was filling, cheap, and tasted better than most things you could afford. In the right moment, it tasted like comfort. In the wrong one, it tasted like the only option. But either way, it got the job done. Bear fat biscuits carried the taste of hard wilderness living and the quiet ingenuity of hunters who used every resource. When butter or lard ran out, rendered bear fat provided a rich, earthy flavor and the perfect texture for flaky biscuits cooked in heavy cast iron pans over open fires. Hunters melted the fat slowly to remove impurities, then mixed it with flour, a pinch of salt, and cold spring water to form a soft dough that baked into golden rounds. The biscuits emerged tender inside with crisp edges that held the subtle smokiness of the bear itself, making them a breakfast strong enough to last through hours of tracking or chopping wood. Families living deep in the mountains often saved bear hunts for late autumn when the animals were fattened for winter, ensuring the rendered fat would last for months of baking and frying. Modern kitchens rarely use such an ingredient, yet those who remember describe a depth of flavor and resilience that ordinary butter can never equal, a flavor earned through effort and respect for the wild. Shoe fly pie, while often linked with Pennsylvania Dutch, had a strong foothold in southern farm kitchens too. This pie was built on molasses, a cheap sweetener that gave it a dark, rich flavor unmatched by sugar. Crumb topping made from flour, butter, and sugar was sprinkled over the filling, creating a pie that was both sticky and tender. For farming families, it was an easy way to transform pantry staples into something indulgent. Shoe fly pie often appeared on breakfast tables as well as at supper, offering sweetness at any time of day. The name supposedly came from the need to shoo flies away from the sticky molasses, a detail children found amusing. Though once common, the pie slowly disappeared as molasses faded from southern kitchens, replaced by refined sugar and more modern desserts. Shoe fly pie endures in folklore but rarely in reality, leaving only a memory of its humble, sweet character. Forgotten now, it represents the deep ties between food, resourcefulness, and the land that made it possible. Fried cornbread hoe cakes were the sound of supper sizzling in a skillet. Cornmeal, water, salt, and a little grease were all you needed to turn a handful of nothing into a golden brown meal. Hillbilly kitchens loved this trick because it was fast, cheap, and never disappointed. You would drop spoonfuls of batter into the pan, listen for that familiar hiss, and wait for the edges to crisp. Hoe cakes were bread, but they were also pride, a way to make the table feel full even when meat was missing. They paired with beans, greens, and gravy, soaking up every last bit of flavor. No fork was needed, just hands and hunger. The smell alone could stop anyone passing by. Fried cornbread hoe cakes were the mountain version of comfort food, simple fried perfection that spoke louder than any recipe ever could. They were proof that flavor comes from fire, patience, and heart. Sheep sorrel spring soup welcomed the first bright greens of the year with a flavor that was tart and refreshing after the heavy meals of winter. Southern grandmothers gathered tender sorrel leaves from meadows and fence lines just as church bells finished ringing on early spring Sundays. The lemony taste of the wild plants needed little more than a simmer in light chicken broth with onions and a splash of fresh cream to create a soup that sparkled with natural freshness. Children often joined in the hunt for the soft green leaves, learning to recognize the arrow-shaped plants among the grasses. The soup's gentle tang awakened palates that had grown accustomed to preserved vegetables and root cellars during cold months. Families savored each spoonful, knowing that the short season would pass quickly and the tender sorrel would soon grow tough under the stronger sun. Sheep sorrel spring soup remains a lively reminder of the importance of foraging knowledge and the simple joy of gathering food directly from the earth at the very start of a southern spring. There was a time when dinner didn't come from a drive-thru or a frozen box. It came from whatever was on hand. In kitchens where budgets were tight and grocery trips were limited, a humble combination of eggs, milk, flour, and butter could transform into something that filled bellies without emptying wallets. So how was egg sauce on saltines made? Hard-boiled eggs were mashed into a simple white sauce, thickened just enough to spoon over a stack of saltine crackers. It wasn't glamorous, but it got the job done. Eggs were a working-class staple, packed with protein and cheap enough to buy by the dozen. A basic white sauce, made from milk, flour, and butter, was the foundation of countless Depression-era and post-war meals, stretching ingredients without overpowering them. Crackers? those were always in the pantry, whether for soup, snacks, or in this case, an entire meal. Families who couldn't afford fresh bread every day turned to saltines as a substitute, their crisp texture adding just enough bite to an otherwise soft dish. It may not have been the most exciting dinner, but it was warm, filling, and familiar. Kids ate it without fuss. Parents appreciated how far it stretched, and for those who grew up on it, the taste is forever linked to simpler times. Side dishes were once as thoughtfully prepared as the main course, and few were as simple yet elegant as a well-roasted carrot medley. Coated in honey, butter, and a hint of cinnamon, this dish was a staple at homecoming dinners, adding a touch of natural sweetness to balance out heavier meats and casseroles. Carrots were a practical choice for home cooks. They were cheap, easy to store, and available year-round, making them a kitchen essential. Roasting them brought out their natural sugars, and when paired with honey and warm spices, they became more than just a side dish. They were a highlight. Some versions used maple syrup instead, while others incorporated fresh herbs for a more savory twist. No matter the variation, the result was always a vibrant, glossy medley of tender carrots with a flavor profile that felt both nostalgic and indulgent. As processed vegetable sides and microwave steamed bags took over grocery store shelves, many home cooks stopped roasting vegetables altogether. Instead of taking the time to caramelize their natural flavors, people opted for pre-cut and pre-cooked options. The tasty meat pie isn't your average store-bought pie. We're talking about a savory masterpiece filled with delicious goodness. This used to be a classic at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners back in the day before hash brown casseroles came to take the cake. But tasty meat pies had their own beauty. Imagine a flaky, golden brown crust with a filling of seasoned ground meat, chopped vegetables like carrots and peas, and a rich, flavorful gravy. The origins of the meat pie have been traced back to the Neolithic period, around 6000 BC. Yeah, even the Egyptians were a fan of this classic. It's perfect for a potluck, a family dinner, or even a cozy night in. The best part? Its portability. Just grab a slice and head out the door. It's the ultimate dinner on the go. Cream chipped beef on toast was the kind of meal that did not ask for approval. It just showed up. Soldiers had it in mess halls, factory workers had it on break. And if you grew up poor, you probably stared at that milky white sauce clinging to thin strips of salty beef, wondering why it always tasted like desperation with a pinch of comfort. The dish was nicknamed SOS, and no, that did not stand for Save Our Souls, though maybe it should have. It was stuff on a shingle, if you want the cleaned-up version. A slice of toast, barely toasted, because who was wasting electricity on that? Then came the sauce, a flour-thickened mix of butter, milk, and cheap dried beef. Sometimes not even real beef, just salty mystery meat that tried its best. It hit the plate with a wet slap, and you ate it not because you wanted to, but because it was there. Because there was nothing else. It was World War leftovers cooked for peacetime kitchens, and it filled you up, whether you liked it or not. Today, it lives mostly in memory and old military cookbooks. But for those who ate it every week, it is not something you forget. You never really forget what it feels like to scrape the last bit of sauce off your plate with a slice of bread you wish was thicker. Salt pork and wild greens turned the harsh mountain landscape into a plate of rich sustenance. Hunters carried slabs of salt-cured pork that kept for months without spoiling, slicing off pieces to fry in iron skillets until the fat rendered into a fragrant base. Foraged greens like dandelion, mustard, or young nettles were added to the sizzling pan, their bitter edges mellowing in the smoky drippings. A sprinkle of coarse salt and a dash of creek water finished the dish, creating a simple yet powerful meal full of essential minerals and fats. Mountain men praised the way the greens cut through the heaviness of pork, while the pork turned wild leaves into a feast worthy of the long trails. Gatherers moved silently through meadows at dawn to find the freshest shoots, knowing that every handful brought health and strength. Today, the idea of living off cured meat and weeds may seem distant, but the memory of that savory balance remains a testament to survival and resourceful cooking in untamed country. Cured gizzard confit transformed a humble poultry part into a delicacy through slow, deliberate cooking that celebrated thrift and flavor. Grandmothers cleaned the gizzards carefully, seasoning them with salt, pepper, and garden herbs before submerging them in rendered fat from the same bird. Over hours of gentle heat, the tough muscle relaxed into silky tenderness while absorbing every note of seasoning. Once cooled, the gizzards were stored in their own fat, ready to be crisped in a hot skillet or served cold with pickled vegetables. This method ensured nothing from the chicken went to waste and provided a ready source of protein through busy weeks. Guests were often surprised by the rich taste that rivaled more expensive cuts of meat, proving that economy and elegance could share the same plate. Cured gizzard confit stands as a testament to the Southern grandmother's ability to elevate the simplest ingredients into something extraordinary with patience, care, and a deep respect for the whole bird that nourished the family table. In working-class kitchens, the best meals weren't always planned. They were thrown together with whatever was available. A pound of ground beef, a can of tomatoes, some diced potatoes, and a handful of elbow macaroni could turn into a thick, hearty stew that stuck to your ribs and stretched across multiple meals. Some called it slumgullion, others just called it dinner. Dishes like this had no strict recipe, just a basic formula, cheap, filling, and endlessly adaptable. One night it might be heavy on potatoes, the next, macaroni took center stage. Some families added onions for flavor, while others bulked it up with beans or whatever vegetables were left in the fridge. The name slumgullion had been around since the 1800s, used by miners and sailors to describe a hodgepodge meal, proof that resourceful cooking had always been part of survival. Ground beef was one of the most affordable proteins in the 1960s, and canned tomatoes provided flavor without the cost of fresh produce. With a simple pot and a little seasoning, this one-dish meal fed entire families with ease. It was the kind of food that tasted even better the next day, reheated on the stove after a long shift or a day at school. Comfort food without the price tag. The ground beef veggie stew is the perfect combination of simple ingredients and a big flavor. This dinner dish is a budget-friendly and nutritious dinner option made with ground beef and a variety of vegetables. Plus, it's a great way to use up any leftover vegetables you might have hanging out in your fridge. You can customize this stew to your liking. Throw in some chopped potatoes for extra starch, or add a splash of your favorite hot sauce for a kick. Ground beef. Veggie stew is a classic comfort food that's easy to make, but let's be honest, it's vanishing from our tables because it can't compete with the modern options. You know, like the Crunch Wrap Supreme from Taco Bell. I bet Taco Bell doesn't remind you of your grandma and your cousins, though. Some of the best dishes come from necessity, and few ingredients are as dependable as potatoes. For generations, scalloped potatoes were a staple at homecoming dinners, potlucks, and Sunday feasts. Thinly sliced and baked in a rich, velvety sauce, they were a testament to the idea that simple ingredients, when treated right, could feel downright luxurious. Potatoes were the backbone of many American kitchens. They were cheap, easy to store, and could feed an entire family without much effort. The addition of a creamy sauce, made from milk, butter, and a touch of garlic, elevated this humble dish into something special. Some versions kept it simple, while others included layers of cheese, turning it into a gooey, golden masterpiece. Either way, it was a comforting, belly-filling side that paired well with just about any main course. The cooking process required patience. Proper scalloped potatoes weren't rushed. Each layer had to absorb the sauce, and the top needed time to develop that perfect golden crust. But as boxed potato mixes and instant gratins took over, homemade scalloped potatoes started to fade from dinner tables. Sloppy Joes were chaos in a bun. They were sweet, tangy, sticky, and somehow always managed to spill no matter how carefully you ate them. This was not just a school lunch special. It was dinner for anyone trying to make a pound of ground beef stretch to its limits. The sauce was ketchup, sugar, vinegar, and maybe a splash of Worcestershire, if your family had that kind of spice rack. You browned the meat, dumped in the sauce, stirred it until it bubbled, then plopped it on the cheapest hamburger buns you could find. The kind that disintegrated under pressure. If you were feeling fancy, maybe you toasted the buns. If you were feeling realistic, you just got paper towels ready. Sloppy Joes made no effort to be elegant. They were messy, loud, and comforting, the kind of meal that made a mess of your face and your plate, but you ate every bite because it tasted like sugar and salt and home. You ate fast because it would soak through the bread if you waited, and you never complained because this was one of the good ones, one of the rare meals that actually felt like a treat. Cast iron bannock. Bread offered mountain travelers a quick rustic loaf that required only flour, fat, water, and an open flame. Trappers mixed the ingredients directly in a worn pan, kneading with cold hands until the dough came together in a rough round. They buried the skillet under glowing coals or set it near the fire where heat slowly baked the bread to a golden crust while keeping the inside tender and chewy. The smell of warm grain mingled with pine smoke and damp earth, giving the meal a grounding sense of place. Bannock slices served as breakfast with a smear of wild berry jam, or as the evening side to stewed meat and beans. It held up well for days, making it ideal for long treks when supplies were scarce and every meal had to be reliable. Many travelers swore the bread tasted better with each mile, as the iron absorbed stories of every camp. Modern kitchens rarely recreate that smoky, crackling crust earned only in the heart of the wilderness. Cypress knees. Stew drew its name and subtle flavor from the swampy roots of the cypress tree that lined bayou waters. Grandmothers simmered fresh fish, small shrimp, and local vegetables in a seasoned broth enriched with a few cleaned cypress knees, which released a gentle woodsy essence during cooking. The stew carried the spirit of the Louisiana wetlands, blending the sweetness of seafood with the mysterious aroma of the swamp. Served with crusty bread to soak up the broth, it warmed families after long days spent fishing or gathering along the water's edge. Children learned respect for the bayou as they watched elders harvest the knees carefully without harming the living trees. The dish reflected both reverence for nature and the inventive cooking that defined communities living close to the land. Cypress knees stew remains a rare and evocative taste of the Deep South, a recipe passed quietly from grandmother to grandchild as a celebration of place and patience. Fried green tomatoes with cornmeal crust were the South's way of saying waste nothing, because even an unripe tomato could still shine. When the vines hung heavy with fruit that would not turn red in time, thrifty hands sliced them thick, dusted them in cornmeal, and dropped them into sizzling bacon grease. The kitchen came alive with that familiar pop and crackle, the sound of hunger about to be satisfied. The slices fried golden and crisp, tart inside and smoky outside, a perfect blend of garden freshness and skillet comfort. They were often served beside beans, greens, or gravy, completing a meal that cost almost nothing but tasted like plenty. Each bite carried the flavor of hard work, sunshine, and summer's patience. Mothers never measured. They just knew when the batter was right, and kids learned to flip them when the edges turned brown. Fried green tomatoes were proof that nothing in the South went to waste. Not time, not food, not love. They were simple, dependable, and unforgettable. The first bite snapped with tang. The last ended in quiet satisfaction. In every kitchen that made them, thrift became art, and every plate told the same story: make do and make it delicious. Monkey meat sandwiches were quick, required no cooking, and made use of pantry staples that were cheap, long-lasting, and easy to find. Corned beef was a product of necessity, not luxury. During World War II, canned meats became a lifeline due to rationing, and even after the war ended, they remained a budget-friendly option for working-class families. The addition of mayonnaise provided richness, while relish balanced it out with a tangy bite. Served between two slices of white bread, another inexpensive household staple, it was a no-fuss meal that filled stomachs without emptying wallets. For kids, it was a lunchtime classic, packed into metal lunchboxes alongside an apple and a thermos of milk. For parents, it was a way to make something out of almost nothing. Some might cringe at the thought today, but back then, this frugal creation was a reminder that resourcefulness often tasted better than it sounded. Biscuits and sausage gravy. Okay. This Southern staple might still be a thing in some parts of the country, but let's be real, Biscuits and sausage gravy is definitely not dominating breakfast menus anymore. I guess waffles are to blame for that. But this breakfast legend is the perfect combination of fluffy buttermilk biscuits so light and airy they practically melt in your mouth, along with a creamy sausage gravy, rich with savory sausage and speckled with black pepper. This is a breakfast, or hey, no judgment here, even a dinner combination that's pure comfort food heaven. From the perfect hangover cure to a delicious weekend treat, biscuits and sausage gravy satisfy all cravings. Just maybe lay off the white clothes while you're indulging. That sausage gravy can be a bit enthusiastic when it comes to staining. Rice and gravy was the meal that whispered, "We made it work," after a long, hungry day. Plain white rice, nothing more than starch and steam, was cooked in big pots that never emptied as fast as you thought. And the gravy? That was magic. You scraped the bottom of the meat pan, mixed the fat and flour, maybe some milk if you were lucky, and stirred until it thickened. There was no meat, not really, just the memory of it. But the gravy carried the flavor like a story passed down from better times. You poured it over the rice and watched it disappear into the grains, turning white into brown, bland into bold. It was hot, heavy, and exactly what you needed. Sometimes there was no salt, sometimes no butter, but always the same bowl, the same spoon, the same quiet hope that tomorrow's meal would be more. Rice and gravy was not flashy, it was not celebrated, but it showed up and it stayed. Prairie hen. Fricassee filled rough cabins with the comforting aroma of slow-braised game birds bathed in cream and wild herbs gathered along mountain trails. Hunters cleaned the prairie hens with careful hands, browning the meat in heavy iron pots before adding onions, garlic, and a splash of spring water. A small measure of cream or milk, if it could be spared, created a velvety sauce that simmered for hours until the birds turned tender and the broth thickened into a rich gravy. Families served the fricassee with coarse bread or boiled root vegetables, each bite a blend of earthy herbs and gentle smoke from the fire. This dish transformed lean wild game into something elegant, proving that frontier cooks valued both nourishment and quiet pleasure. Around the hearth, elders shared stories of long hunts across open grasslands while children eagerly awaited their share of the tender meat. Though prairie hens have grown scarce and cream is no longer a rare treasure, the memory of this rustic yet graceful meal remains a tribute to patience and the simple luxury of good company. Chinquapin chestnut dressing showcased a tiny nut once abundant in southern forests, but nearly lost by the mid-20th century. Grandmothers gathered the small chestnuts, cracking their thin shells to reveal sweet, dense meat that added depth to traditional bread stuffing. Mixed with crumbled cornbread, onions, and sage, the dressing baked to a golden crust that perfumed the kitchen with warm, earthy notes. Because the Chinquapin harvest was unpredictable, this dish was reserved for holidays or special Sunday dinners, making it a treasured seasonal event. Children joined the harvest, their pockets filling with the glossy brown nuts that hid beneath fallen leaves. Each bite of the finished dressing carried the flavor of autumn woods and the satisfaction of a successful forage. Chinquapin chestnut dressing stands today as a memory of forests once thick with these small treasures and of the grandmothers who taught that the rarest ingredients often come from careful observation and the patient work of many small hands. Fried apples and biscuits made kitchens smell like home long before the word comfort food existed. Dried apples were soaked and stewed with butter, sugar, and a sprinkle of cinnamon until they turned glossy and golden in the pan. The mixture bubbled low and slow, thick enough to cling to a spoon but soft enough to melt on the tongue. When spooned over warm biscuits split straight from the oven, the syrup soaked down deep into the crumb. It was part breakfast, part dessert, and all memory. Families made it on cool mornings when the stove burned early, using whatever fruit they had dried the summer before. The smell filled every corner of the house, bringing even sleepy children to the table before the first call. For some, this dish was sweeter than candy. For others, it was a reminder of simpler days when love was measured in full plates and clean pans. Fried apples and biscuits proved that comfort did not come from riches, but from the warmth of what was already there. Every spoonful was proof that sweetness could come from scarcity and joy could come from nothing more than a hot biscuit. I can just imagine the satisfying experience of cutting through that tender beef with minimal effort. Swiss steak, a dinnertime classic that deserves a comeback. Where do I sign the petition? Lamb might seem like a fancy restaurant thing these days, but back in the day, it was a total dinnertime MVP. Lamb stew was a fan favorite at dinner parties back in the day, and I get the hype. Imagine the combination of melt-in-your-mouth lamb and an assortment of colorful vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and peas simmered in a rich, flavorful broth just begging to be soaked with some crusty bread. This is a dish that's guaranteed to warm you up from the inside out on a chilly day. Not to mention, it's surprisingly easy to make. Perfect for those nights when you want a delicious meal without spending hours in the kitchen. Just maybe don't tell your grandma you added a sprinkle of your favorite hot sauce. Some traditions are best left untouched. Potato soup was the warmth you clung to when the cold came early and the paycheck came late. You peeled potatoes with dull knives, boiled them in water, and added onions if you had them. The broth was made from milk, or sometimes just more water and hope. It was not fancy. It was not thick. But it was hot and filling and honest. Some families added cheese or bacon bits if they had a little extra. Most just salted it until it tasted like something. You ate it slowly, holding the bowl in your hands like it might warm more than just your fingers. Leftovers were poured into jars and reheated for the next night. It was the kind of soup that stretched itself to meet your needs. It never judged you for having nothing else. And in that way, it did more than feed you. It forgave you. Sourwood honey pone delivered the essence of Appalachian mountain summers in a simple yet unforgettable corn cake. Grandmothers blended fresh ground cornmeal with buttermilk and farm eggs, then stirred in a generous drizzle of rare sourwood honey gathered from high mountain hives. Baked in a cast iron skillet, the pone emerged with a golden crust and a moist crumb sweetened with the floral, slightly tangy notes of the honey. Families prize this treat because sourwood blooms for only a short season, making the honey a cherished ingredient that neighbors often traded like gold. Served warm with fresh butter, each slice carried the fragrance of mountain flowers and the warmth of hearth and home. Children savored every bite, aware that the next taste might be a year away. Sourwood honey pone remains a beloved memory of the Appalachian Hills, where natural bounty and careful timing combined to create a dish that was as fleeting as it was delicious. Now, Swiss steak is like a warm hug from the past. This dish is all about slow-cooked, fall-apart tender beef bathed in a tangy tomato sauce. Think slow cooker vibes, but way before slow cookers were even a thing. Now, the Swiss steak is all about patience. The longer you simmer the beef, the more melt-in-your-mouth delicious it becomes. It's also the perfect way to use up that tougher cut of meat you accidentally grabbed at the store. If you grew up thinking this dish was from Switzerland, as the name suggests, now would be a good time for me to tell you your whole life was a lie. This technique of cooking up tender meat came from England, so they're the ones to thank for this meaty goodness. Hot dogs and baked beans were the dinner of choice when you had 5 mouths and $1. This was not about taste. This was about calories. You dumped a can of beans into a pot, sliced up some hot dogs, and let the whole thing simmer until it bubbled like lava in a cartoon. The beans were sweet, sticky, and filled with brown sugar or molasses, depending on the brand or the sale. The hot dogs were sometimes boiled first, but usually not. They were cut into coins and stirred in like meat confetti. You served it with white bread, not because it matched, but because it was there. No plates necessary, just bowls and spoons and the quiet acceptance that this was dinner, again. For some kids, this meal was a treat. For others, it was a warning sign. You knew what kind of week it was by how often it showed up. Still, it filled you up, and that mattered. The salt hit your tongue and stayed there. Even now, you probably remember that smell. Sweet, smoky beans and sizzling hot dogs, coming from a chipped pot on a rusty stove. Smoked venison. Jerky ensured that nothing from a successful hunt went to waste and that meat would last through the long frozen months. Lean deer strips were salted generously and hung above a low smoldering fire for hours, sometimes days, until the smoke kissed every fiber and the moisture vanished. The process demanded patience and constant tending to keep the temperature steady without open flames. The result was a dark, chewy strip packed with protein and smoky depth that could be eaten on the trail without any preparation. Hunters and trappers stored the jerky in cloth bags or metal tins, confident it would keep through weeks of travel. Children gnawed on pieces like candy, and adults often crumbled bits into stews for an extra layer of flavor. Even today, jerky remains popular, but few modern versions capture the true wilderness taste of venison, slowly dried over real wood smoke while wind rustled through the trees and snow crept along the ground outside the camp. If these forgotten dinners brought back a memory, share the one you miss most, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more tastes of the past.